Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our continuing professional development webinar series part 2. For the discussion today, the topic will be on providing supportive instruction through medium of teaching and learning or MOTL. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions in the comment box allotted during the session and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. He is a consultant and evaluator for K-12 Philippine Basic Education, the curriculum and academic consultant of Sisters of Mary. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Brother Roderick M. Aguirre.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and teachers. Welcome again to, it's a rainy Thursday here in Cavite, and I'm feeling under the weather right now because there's a drastic change of the climate from really too hot, and then all of a sudden, the breeze became, I think, more of Christmassy kind of weather, and it's raining cats and dogs. So nonetheless, the show must go on, and this is something that I'm close to my heart when we talk about the MOTL, because I've been advocating that all teachers, regardless of the subject they teach, need to consider themselves as language teachers, because whether we like it or not, the process of learning and process of acquiring information is through the language. Even acquiring culture, acquiring belief system, acquiring all the things that we need to learn about the world, about our society, about a particular subject area. Let's not go beyond that though, like the whole world per se, but something that we would like our children and ourselves to learn about at home are basically carried on through the language. And I believe, and it's not just a belief though, and it is actually a fact that language is the vehicle of information. And if our students and our teachers are not careful in the use of the language, there's a huge possibility of misunderstanding, if not miscomprehension, of the information that we are getting from the language, be it an online in the media, language of the media, or language of the instructional materials, or the language of the teachers that they use to convey the information and the lesson of the content area. And that's what we're going to discuss today. And I tried to make it concise as possible because I've been aiming for really try my best to finish my delivery within the given time so that I will be more efficient. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm effective, but what I'm trying to say, I'm trying my best to be effective, but now I'm trying my best also to be efficient at the same time. Now let me share with you my PowerPoint presentation. It's just a simple PowerPoint presentation, and our topic for this afternoon is titled Providing Supportive Instruction Through Medium of Teaching and Learning. I know that you guys out there will be asking, what the heck is medium of teaching and learning? Is that a new term again? Well, it emanated from the previous nomenclature, medium of instruction. All right. Only that we are now using medium of teaching and learning to make it more holistic in its perspective that language is not only the medium for teaching, but also a medium for students to learn the content area, or for every individual to learn something. So it is a vehicle. Language now, or the medium of teaching and learning, would be through the language. All right. Sorry for that sound. I think I have to lower down my volume, my cell phone. Okay, there you go. So that will not be distracted. So let's just dive into the goods for this afternoon. Let's begin with, of course, busting myths. All right. So what we're gonna do is that I'm going to present. I've done a research for me. I got some good information from British Council and United Nations about myths, most specifically parents' beliefs about language. and what should be taught at school, and what language, I'm sorry, and what language should be used to teach their kids at school, and what language should be taught first at home. And these are some of the most important statements that I would like to present to you out there, and we're going to bust it and why they're called myths. Let us begin with the first statement. Charan. I think I need to explore next time, probably by January when we resume. I don't know if we even have a Christmas vacation, but by January, I'm thinking of putting a little bit of sun, but I'm not sure if it's gonna put through the online. But anyway, okay, let's go back. Sorry, I'm already thinking aloud again. So, first statement is English is one of the dominant languages in the world. Hence, must be chosen as a dominant medium of teaching and learning. Well, it's a fact. English is one of the dominant languages in the world. Of course, Mandarin, Cantonese, Spanish would be one of those dominant languages in the world. And I think one emerging dominant language right now would be, when we talk about dominant, we're not talking about tier um, status, okay, status of say of the language per se, but we're talking about the number of speakers who use English as a first language, and also looking at the economic status of the origin of the language. We're talking about, say, since China, there are a lot of Chinese who speak Cantonese, and it's used for their trade and industry and in businesses. So it's prolifically used in all sorts of their daily activities. English would be one of that too. Spanish would be one of that too. Of course, and one emerging would be Korean. Okay, Korean language. So it says here, just because English is a dominant language, a lot of people will definitely have this perspective and belief that it should be the language or dominant language of medium instruction and teaching and learning at school, so that kids will have a better start alive. That if the kids can speak better English, then they have a good shot at a better life. I beg to disagree. Research, and a lot of research showed that English is being able to speak good English does not equate intelligence, does not equate success. There are a lot of people out there, like I've said, Chinese people, Korean people, Spanish people, and even a lot of Filipinos have been successful in life who does not necessarily have a good command of the English language. English is only one of the languages, okay, in the world. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the vehicle, like the language of knowledge and all other information, it's not a monopoly of the English language. It is all the characteristics of all languages in the world. All languages in the world, regardless whether there are many number of speakers, what they convey, there are vehicles of knowledge, vehicles of a value system, vehicles of culture in general, vehicles of the subject area. If we can learn anything with any languages in the world, even if it's click language, even if it's a sign language, for as long as they're considered language, they are vehicles to information. All right. And I think it's the people who demons other language, who have a different perspective of another language that makes the other language, lower in stature. And this type of people who believe that these other languages, aside from English or Filipino or Tagalog, would facilitate the gradual death of these languages. David Crystal, in his new edition of his book of Encyclopedia of Languages, and when he was interviewed, but in Cambridge, he said that there are, without the knowledge of a lot of people, there are 7 languages that die every day. When we say die every day, there are no longer speakers of the language, like what happened to Latin. Now, we don't want our languages in the Philippines to die a natural death, and we just, studied them and said, it used to be that language exists in the Philippines. We don't want that. What we want is that our students learn the language, appreciate the culture behind the language, or that's being propagated by the language, because language is an element of culture. Okay, and you cannot separate the culture from the language. And on that note, okay, on that note, if the language dies, that means that culture dies with it. And vice versa. If a culture dies, the language dies with that. What we want for our students in the Philippines is that they grow up in the culture and the language, and at the same time use all these foundational skills and knowledge to be able to learn other languages. That will be English, Filipino, and other languages in the world. It does not demean any person who cannot speak good English. For as long as they know language and they understand each other, they use the same comprehensible language, and then they are able to communicate, then I would say that the language just works pretty well. Therefore, English, even if it's one of the dominant languages in the world, does not mean it has the monopoly of being the star, of being the medium of teaching and learning in the Philippines, especially in our curriculum. It is just one of the many languages that we want our students to be proficient with. Okay, one of the and not the. And therefore, statement number one is busted. Let's proceed to statement. I hope a lot of people out there will believe that. I know that a lot of teachers and parents out there feel like ang galing-galing naman ng mga tao na yung mag-English. They can convey their ideas. Like in myself, I have difficulty conveying my ideas in Filipino, and I feel so bad because I want to be conversant in the Filipino language too, but I have to be comfortable with that. And when we talk about learning a language and acquiring a language and being able to communicate with that, means also being able to acquire the language, and it takes an effort. Okay, we need to make an effort out of that, and it's the same for English, and it's the same for other languages in the world. So, wag po tayo magsabi na English lang ang magaling, English lang ang importante sa buong mundo ito. Okay? All languages are equal in its importance and its role in propagating information and preserving culture. Statement number two. I don't want to linger. I really would like to linger on number one because this is what I want to center on during the whole 1 hour talk for this afternoon. But alas, we have to move on. Let's move on. Okay, so statement number two is common belief of right now in the Philippines, although um, a lot of research says that it's otherwise. Okay, let's read statement number one. Mother tongue as a medium of teaching, learning undermines the learner's time in learning English. What happened is that in the Philippines, a lot of parents, a lot of political parties, a lot of politicians, and even teachers. I've heard a lot of teachers still saying that naubos, sorry to siya Filipino, since we're talking about language, naintindihan niyo na rin naman ako, naubos daw ang oras ng mga bata, nabawasan ang oras ng mga bata sa pag-aral ng English dahil nadagdagan ng subject sa mother tongue, na dapat yung oras na ginugugol ng mga bata sa pag-aaral sa mother tongue na hindi naman nagagamit kung saan-saan ay nabawas at dapat napunta sa English, sa pag-aaral ng English, kasi ang English naman ang ginagamit sa commerce in the Philippines, in our industries in the Philippines. I beg to disagree. That a lot. Like if you go to Mindanao, if you go to Cebu, if you go to Davao, basically Mindanao and Visayas, there are a lot of Visayan speakers. There are a lot of many languages, prolific languages. The Cebuano is being used in the music industry, in poetry, in literature. I think it is the attitude of people towards their own language. I think one of the many problems in the Philippines is that the people who speak the language are the ones also are, not supporting their own language. If we want our mother tongue to prosper, to become intellectualized and be gradually introduced to the commerce and the regular industries, not regular, in industries, that people should not demon that language. And what I like about most in Cebu, in other language, they are proud of using the language. And that's what we want also for the rest of the Philippines, that you don't have to be ashamed of your own language. You don't have to 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 be ashamed about your accent when you speak English. That say, oh, I need to have a neutral accent so that people when they hear me when I speak English or Tagalog or Filipino, they wouldn't identify or capture a certain accent that I have imposed on the use of English or Filipino, so that they are not able to identify which part of the Philippines I come from. That doesn't matter. Tao lang talaga, ang Pilipino lang talaga ang masyadong critical at masyadong judgmental sa kapwa niya Filipino. What we do is to support sa, oh wow, gaya ng pagdimen ng language ng Cebuano o ng Bisaya. Si Bisaya yan, mga yaya yan, mga katulong mga yan. Wait. Pagkatulong, Bisaya agad. Hindi ba pwedeng maraming iba? May mga katulong din naman ng mga galing sa ibang lugar. And we don't have to demon the job katulong and equate that to demeaning the language as well. That is a noble job. And a language is noble as well. All right? So I think people are the ones who put a certain stature of a language lower than they want it to be. Okay, therefore, mother tongue as a medium in teaching, learning, undermine the learner's time in learning English. No, it even promotes critical thinking and early literacy development among our students. If only our teachers have been trained well, and if only our parents and our community support our teachers on this, because we need to have good materials, instructional materials for our students to use, and for our teachers to manipulate and exploit in its positive way, and use that inside the classroom and outside the classroom. What we want our students is so that it's easy for them to learn concepts, how to read and write in a language they're comfortable with. So what I'm trying to say here, it does not undermine the learning of the English language. It even supports the learning of a language, not just English, but all other languages. Halimbawa po, yung sinasabi yung mga katulong naman natin, hindi naman magaling mag-English. Bakit at magaling lang mag-Bisaya? Paano kung tingnan mo pag nagtrabaho sila sa abroad, bakit hindi naman sila tinuruan sa English sa Pilipinas, kunwari hindi natapos, bakit pagdating sa ibang bansa natututo naman sila mag-English? And they become even better at it. It's because they are their mother tongue, okay, their first language helps them in their cognitive functions to think about meaning and then express, eventually find ways to learn the language so that they can express their thoughts in that language. As simple as that. So therefore, statement number 2, that mother tongue, let me go on. I should do my thing. The statement number 2, that mother tongue as a medium in teaching, learning, undermine the learner's time in learning, is busted. There's going to be there you go, a cross mark. Finally, the third statement says that the more time people spend in a second or foreign language context, the more quickly they learn the language. Yes, a lot of Filipinos, a lot of parents, a lot of teachers believe that if we keep on, using English in all contexts, in foreign contexts, we get to easily learn the language. And it's partially true, but it's also stressful cognitively and emotionally for other people. Mind you, when I was learning Filipino at Filipino University, and my teacher was, bless his soul, Dr. Badayos, it was so stressful for me. I sweat all the time. Every time I speak in Filipino, I sweat because I was so conscious about what words do I use to express my ideas. I was thinking in English, and in my mind, I was translating that in Filipino, and I was grasping for words and vocabulary that would, be appropriate words to express my ideas. And it was a chaotic situation in my head. And then a lot of my classmates were laughing so much and laughing so hard because I was sweating profusely. And they think that I tried my best to use Filipino or Tagalog in all contexts when I was in college. The problem was that is people get to laugh at me, and people were saying I really was serious about learning it. Magkiba kasing Tagalog sa Filipino po. No? I really admire a lot of Filipino teachers who speak good Filipino. My point there is that Had I been encouraged and not been laughed at, I would have been probably better Filipino speaker right now. I, I became so ashamed of speaking Filipino, so I just, resigned myself that, all right, so if you're laughing at me, then I'd rather not. I just saw Filipino then as a subject, as something that I need to pass and something that I need to accomplish so that I would academically finish my 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 bachelor's degree. And we don't want that for our kids. What we want our kids is that they see all languages in the world as equal. All right, be it foreign language, be it a local language, be it a native language, all languages. Just because we don't understand them does not mean that they are not better language or they are lower type of language than ours. Okay, so therefore, statement number three: the more time people spend in second or foreign language context, the more quickly they learn the language. It's busted. It is not how often. It's not on the time, the more time you spend in the foreign language context, but it's the meaningful way of using the language in situations, meaningful use of the language. And therefore, statement number three is busted. All right. So I would like you to realize just a self knowledge about how well you know the medium of instruction and teaching, medium of teaching and learning in the context of the K-12 curriculum. So I would like you to realize these are some facts that I would like you to more of uh, going through your mind. Like this is what you call a self-knowledge. Do I know this? In my in since we started K-12 2012, that would be about 8 years now, okay, or seven, moving towards 8 years, 7 to 8 years of the implementation of the K-12 curriculum. Do I know the following information about the MOTL? All right. So let's begin with I got this, of course, from the Implementing Rules and Regulations of Republic Act 10553, also known as the Enhanced Basic Education in the Philippines, or commonly known as the K-12 program. This is from Section 4, Paragraph D. Do you know? Okay, do you know? Or are you quite aware that the mother language or first language refers to the language or languages first learned by a child? Although the word learn, it should not be there, it should be acquired. So first refers to the language or languages first acquired by a child which she identifies with. Is identified as a native language or language user by others which he or she knows best or uses most. So it is when we talk about first language or mother language or mother tongue, we're talking about the first language the child has been exposed to. That's why it's called mother language, because ideally, well, naturally, kids, individuals' first concept about the language would be from the mother. And while they're still in the womb of the mother, the first two concepts of sounds that they acquire of the language would be from the mother's heartbeat and from the mother's voice. And hence, that's why it's called mother tongue or mother language, because it's the first language the kids have been exposed to, and this is what how they identify themselves too. A good example would, and we're not talking about here language of the community or language of the region or language a national language. We're talking about individual first language. A good example would be, say, a child, say in Cavite, Tagalog naman sa Cavite pa, no? Tagalog in Cavite. But then again, the parents decided that the language that they want their kids to be exposed to first would be English. So they try the best that while the mother is, in the first, second, the third trimester, they they talk to the child while inside the womb using in English until the child is born, and they still use English and so on and so forth. All right, and therefore it's just that the community uses Tagalog or Cavite Tagalog, but this one particular child is growing up with a decision of the family that it will be English. Now the question is, what would be the first language of the child? Then it would be English. Okay, we don't have to say it's Philippine English or Cavite English. It's just English. Simple. I, I don't know why a lot of people would, okay, branding is one, but then again, what we want is the, identifying the first language. The child you learns and acquires vocabulary, sound system, and all oral language proficiency in that language, and is able to communicate his basic needs and ideas and communicate to his parents using the language. And therefore, that particular child's first language of the mother, that's what it means here. It's not prescribed. It is what the child. And what happened in the field is that a lot of people hate the mother tongue program in the Philippines because it's prescribed. The English could be the mother tongue of our students too. Okay, and you know that too. It's just you felt so bad because the Department of Education, I'm not against the Department of Education, it's that some of the people in the Department of Education, without not really believing in the mother tongue, came up with a highly prescriptive way of identifying the mother tongues of children. You do not identify, yeah, we do identify the mother tongues of our students, but it's their mother tongue, not what we perceive their mother tongue to be. If it's English, it's English. It's Filipino, it's Filipino. Sample po, sa Davao, marami pa akong nakausap ng mga bata na mga kabataan na marunong mag-English, mag-Tagalog, marunong mag-Bisaya. Bakit po? They are growing up bilingual because the community has growing up in with the media that uses Tagalog or uses Filipino, and then of course it's family, they have Bisaya or Davaoeno language, so they are growing up bilingual in that language. Let's not talk about the different designs and different models of bilingualism. I'm just saying that they're learning two languages at the same time. It doesn't mean that the child that doesn't mean that the child would have problems learning the English language. Instruction of the English language would be a different perspective altogether. Okay? Huwag niyo nating sabihin na kasalanan ng mother tongue. Posible hindi lang naturo ng maayos sa school. Hindi angkop ang mga nagamit ng mga strategiya, or hindi niya nakita ang transitioning na dapat ang mga natutunan ng bata sa wika na yon, sa mother tongue or sa Filipino o sa Tagalog man lang yon o sa first language niya, dapat pinagpapatuloy sa ibang wika or sa mga wikang dapat niyang matutunan. Alright? Hindi siya, ang tawag natin doon ay transitioning. Okay, we transition what our students learn from the language to other languages. Next, the regional or native language refers to the traditional speech variety or variety of Filipino sign languages, a language existing in a region, area, or place. So we also consider, we should, and we consider that sign language is also a language. Okay? Sa aking paglaki ko po sa Palo Leyte, marami pong mayroon po mga pipe na nakasalamuha. They have their own sign language and we try our best to understand them. But this is how the way they communicate to us. And well, we were trying to understand it, but there were a lot of people who were making fun of the deaf and mute people, not understanding that that's their way of communicating, and making fun of the way they communicate is making fun of their language and making fun of the way they communicate, and therefore they are misunderstood. And I think a lot of people need to be uh, uh, educated about how to respect the language of people, be it the language of the deaf, language of the blind. These are all languages and should not be deemed as, a lower type of language. Also, in section 10.4, just to go through with this though, is that the curriculum shall develop proficiency in Filipino and English, provided the first and dominant language of the learner shall serve as the fundamental language of education. We've been doing this, people. We have to be honest with ourselves that as teachers, and we're teaching, say, Filipino in the public school system, probably there would be a different picture in some private schools where most of their students speak good English and use English as their first language. But in the public school system, not all families opt for English as a first language of their children. Most of them have this high regard for the language that they come from, and hence they choose their own local language, their own language of the community. So on that note, the Department of Education has to respect this and use this mother tongue as the fundamental language for students to learn and acquire proficient levels in Filipino and English. Bakit po? May alam na ng batang, may alam ng wika ang bata. Doon tayo magsimula because one of the principles of learning and teaching is that we start from where our students come from. Our students do not come to our school without zero knowledge about language and how to use it. They already have the first language, and what we can do is use that. Okay, use that, propagate that, improve that, so that what the skills that they learn from the language is transitioned on to the other languages. Also, for kindergarten, the first 3 years of elementary education, instruction, teaching materials, and assessment shall be in regional or native language of the learners. I think you got that already there. All right. Next, not anymore that. Oh, well, I would like to look at the Filipino and English shall be gradually introduced as languages of instruction until such time when these two languages can become the primary languages of instruction at the secondary level. All right. Would like you to look and I would like you to observe that there are a lot of Chinese people who are very intelligent. A lot of Korean people who are intelligent coming up with good movies, prolific in their music, but they're using their language. And that's what we want for the Philippines too. That we be recognized that we have our own language, we have our own culture, and even if we are good in English, does not make us, does not make us really all intelligent. Okay, again, English is not does not have the monopoly of determining if one person is intelligent or not. All languages has that capacity. So let's now have question number one. Okay, what is the medium of teaching and learning? Just to clarify that, and for us to know that language is a supportive element in the teaching and learning. And without language being the medium of teaching and medium of learning, then the educative process would not take place. Because there are two sides of the educative process, the teaching side and the learning side. For them to be successful, to be together in a holistic perspective of the educative process, language is at the middle of that. All right. And on that note, what we want to see and we want to consider is that the teachers are supposed to be the models of the level of proficiency in the use of the language as a model for our students to achieve on or to achieve to or to aspire to or to aspire up to, in order that the teachers become an epitome of how the language is used, not just as a language per se, or just using language per se, but also how this language is used in the content area. What I'm trying to say here is that even if there's English and there's Filipino and there's mother tongue, English and Filipino would behave depending on how they are used in a particular context, in a particular content, in a particular culture. A good example would be English is different from the English. English is different from English in mathematics, English in science, English in TLE. Like manner, Filipino is different from Filipino as a subject, and Filipino as used in a lipunan. Although learning the language per se would help us, be able to know and learn about the language, but we still need to use the language to learn the content. You know what I'm trying to say? And there's a possibility that our vocabulary that are endemic to that content. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to say here. It's that we need to be mindful as teachers. We need to be mindful that we teach the language of our content as well. We don't rely on what our language teachers teach to our students. We need to capture what our language teachers teach to our students, and then help our students learn the content via that language. Because at the end of the day, our students will not learn anything from what we are teaching them if they do not understand the language of our content. So again, I would like to base again on facts what my answer to the question. To question number one, section 10.4 of the Implementing Rules and Regulations of Republic Act 10533 says that the medium of teaching and learning is in the basic education shall be delivered in languages understood by the learners, as language plays a strategic role in shaping the formative years of learners. UNICEF, United Nations, and USAID came up with a really good study that individuals and students learn faster, more effective, efficient, more efficiently if they are learning something using a language that they are familiar with. Okay, so say if our students are not yet familiar in they're still learning English, and then all of a sudden we have a subject in Filipino, sorry, we have a subject in math and science that is in English. Do you think your students will survive English, will survive science and mathematics when they are still learning English language? And that's what's happening grade 3, grade 2, and grade 3, in especially the public schools, where our students are still learning English, how to read and be literate, and how to use an oral language, an oral form English language, and in Filipino for non-Tagalog speakers. And here comes there's a subject in mathematics and subject in science that utilizes them to be proficient in the language. Do you think kids would survive that? It's kind of like punishing them already. They did not know how to swim yet, and yet you threw them in the ocean, and sink or swim. That's not good. So there are two sides of the coin when we talk about medium of teaching and learning. And the first side of that would be, of course, our educators, our teachers being the the best example, the best model of how the language is used in the content. We think about how the language is used in the content. I don't want to say kagaya po sa akin, just because I can speak English doesn't mean I can explain and I could be a good math teacher. Why? I may have a good command of the English language, but I do not know how English behaves in mathematics, and plus, I don't have proficiency of the content of mathematics. So in teaching, it is very important that the two elements are there. You have the language and the content. They're always together. You cannot teach the content to the students without the vehicle of the language. Also, if even if you have good command of the English language and you have not mastered your content, still learning will be greatly compromised. So they go together. And I think what Department of Education and the rest of the Philippines should be doing is that equipping our teachers to be good to be good on both. What we've been doing in the country is that we've been providing our teachers with content strategies, training on strategies on teaching the content, but we have failed to help our teachers to to retool them. Well, I wouldn't say retool; it should be there to begin with. To tool them with the necessary skill to use the language to convey the content. Marami dyan mga teachers ng science, nagtuturo ng science at saka math, pag may mga training on reading, training on literacy, on how to use English or language strategies, hindi ako attendan, hindi yan pang amin, pang English at saka Filipino lang yan. Wait, don't you use language to convey your content to our students? And I think one of the many problems of our students in this subject areas, why we got low in mathematics and science, sorry for the I, is that our students struggle so much understanding the content because they do not understand the language of that content. It is not the content per se that they do not understand. The content is easy to understand if the language is familiar and comprehensible to us. Kagaya na, kayo po, will you be able to read Little Red Riding Hood in French? You wouldn't know to begin with that's Little Red Riding Hood, because if you do not know you don't know French, you wouldn't know what the content is all about. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. If kids, marunong naman English, iba ang English kasi ng math. Iba ang English ng science. Iba ang English naman ng TLE. That's why they call it MOTL, language and content. All right. Dr. Tatlong Hari came up with a really good good analogy, a good graphical presentation of how language behaves in the content areas. I'll show it to you later on. He brilliant guy. He did that. He conceptualized it way back in 2008. Okay. So we use the language, okay, as a medium in teaching, and medium teaching would be, all right, Ang momento. My laptop is hanging, probably because I have a lot of files already. Okay, so we're teaching our students. As teachers, we use the language. I don't want to say it's English. Okay, a language. It could be Filipino. It could be mother tongue. It could be for Chinese schools, Mandarin for international schools. It could be French. When I say language, the language. Okay, a medium teaching for teachers to communicate the knowledge and skills and attitude, values, and ethics of the content, specific content. And look at the color. I made a different color. There's a possibility that the language that the teachers use to convey the knowledge and skills and attitudes, values, and ethics of the content may not be the language that our students use. All right. And then the bigger knowledge that they understand is still our teacher. And our teachers also use the language to demonstrate the skills and expected learning outcomes. We still use that language. And then because of the language of the students' medium of learning is not as the same as not as proficient as the teachers, they would use their own level of proficiency to communicate back to our teachers what they have understood and what they have learned. Correct. Now, if the teachers see that the level of proficiency of our students in the use of the medium of learning, which we model through the medium of teaching, I think the teachers should also do some intervention programs to help the students learn the language of the content. Okay? Ang na-observe ko, sorry po, I would use mathematics as an example. Ang nangyari kasi sa pagtuturo ng mathematics, bakit nahirapan ng mga bata, is that nakita na po natin na bumagsak ang bata sa mathematics. Nahihirapan ng mga bata. Ang ating pong iniisip agad na ang bata mahina sa math. Hindi pa pwedeng, hindi lang niya naintindihan ang math dahil hindi lang niya maintindihan ang pagpapaliwanag at ang wikang gamit ng teacher, ng math teacher. Sabi ng mga teachers, ito talaga ang language ng math. I know that is the language of math. The question is, did you teach your students the language of math? What's difficult for mathematics is that the oral language of mathematics is quite different from its written language. Nagugulan ang bata bakit si teacher pag nag-explain, pag sinulat sa blackboard, symbolic siya. Did you somehow teach your students to transition, help them transition that if they see the symbol, it means this? That when you see when you say statements, when it's written down, it is in equation form, it's symbolic form. This is what we're saying, supportive instruction, language as a supportive instruction. Our students will be supported in the learning of the content if they are just supported in learning the language of that content. Just because we have English and Filipino does not make our students easy, proficient to learn the other subject areas. Hence, all teachers teaching a content area must be the language teacher of that content area. Okay? And para po kapareho sa color po nito. Okay? Well, I think I was able to use, like, iba pa rin po ang mga vocabulary ng science, ibang vocabulary ng mathematics, ibang vocabulary ng theory, kagaya ng kung sa English sa subject or literature, sa dinami-dami isang paragraph sa science, sa mathematics, isang equation lang yan. Ang daming paragraph sa English, sa literature, pagdating sa science, ano lang yan, isang word lang yan. Like the word photosynthesis. The word photosynthesis in science is basically one whole sentence and even more than that. It could be just, it could be an article in itself. And when they say the word photosynthesis in itself, do you think you can make students understand, ano yung sabi ng photosynthesis? It's a process of what? Ang daming procedure. Pag sinabi photosynthesis, ang daming pang under that, yung sunlight, yung pag-convert into, di ba? So, it's mind-boggling for our students. Our students survive the content is because finally, the language of the content is now familiar and comprehensible to them. For as long as we don't make the language of the content familiar and comprehensible for our students, they will still not understand the content. And they say, Sir, bakit mabilis po kayo matuto? It's because I try my best first to understand the language of the material that I'm reading. It cannot be the language that I know. When I read something or when I learn something, I try my best to put the persona of the perspective that this person is using a different language and I need to understand his or her language. Okay, hindi ko i-impose ang language ko sa language ng iba. And that's what we want for our students and what we want our students to learn too. So teachers and students use spoken and written language to communicate with each other, to present tasks, engage in learning processes, present academic content, access learning, display knowledge and skill, and build classroom life. All right? In truth, much of what our students learn is language because language and content cannot be separated. They always go together. If our students do not understand the language, we cannot expect our students to understand the content. We cannot expect our students to know the content and not know the language. Sorry, know the language. They go together. It's like language and culture. Okay. So let's proceed to question number 2. I'm sorry, I'm so hooked up and so emotional about all the things. Let me check my time. My goodness, I'm almost there. But we're halfway through already. What is the importance of MOTL in the educative process? Okay. So, according to Dr. Melchor A. Tatlumari way back in 2008, he said that he explained, okay, he explained that language is amorphous. It doesn't have shape. Language for language sake is nothing. We need to use language to communicate something. Language is a vehicle. Okay? Kung language alone lang, walang laman po yan. Kaya sinabi ng language and literature. Hindi pwedeng language lang. Na language for language sake. Unless we're linguists studying language for language sake. But then again, in learning and teaching and learning, what Tatung Hari got on point is that we have, as teachers, we need to understand that the language takes the shape of the content area, and the subject areas have different shapes. They do not conform to just one shape. We cannot, and it's not our job as teachers to change the shape or the nature of the subject area. Otherwise, you change the nature of the subject. Teachers teach the students its nature, its cognitive landscape. Okay, and we approximate that. And once we approximate that, the language that we use to help our students understand the cognitive landscape of the content area is via the language. And we conform and we use the language within that shape or cognitive landscape of the content area. Hence, say this is science, okay, this is science. I chose a circle because science is, for me, it's like a continuous process. Okay? It's a continuous process, like experimentation. It never ends. Even if it ends, it's still another experiment and so on and so forth. So, say circle. Science, the language will now, when language is used in the content science, it will take the shape of the science, the cognitive landscape of science. In like manner, in mathematics, okay, in mathematics, if it's a square, bakit po tinawag, ako lang po ito ha, ginawa ko siyang square because it's exact. It's procedural. It's, kung ano yung nakalagay doon, yun po yun. Okay, walang opinion dyan. Okay? Also, say araling panlipunan, it will also take the shape of the cognitive landscape of araling panlipunan. And that's why our students are quite left quite baffled as to marunong naman ako mag-Ingles, marunong naman ako mag-Tagalog, marunong naman ako mag-Filipino, marunong naman ako sa mother tongue, ba't hindi ko siya maintindihan sa math? Ba't hindi ko siya maintindihan? Ba't ang mother tongue sa math, hindi ko maintindihan? It's because the language being used in that content is not comprehensible to the students. If we but just first use the language that is comprehensible to our students and gradually introduce them to the language of the content and to the content itself, then our students probably will be understanding it. Hindi natin, ang ginawa lang natin is ituro lang ang content. Bahala ang bata, marunong naman, may subject naman ng English, Filipino, bahala sila magturo doon. It's our job too as a community teacher. Not anymore that, okay? Huwag natin again. Yeah. So, in order to enhance students' learning, they need access. Ito yung sinasabi ko na po. or question number two. Let's summarize it. In order to enhance students' learning, they need access to inclusive and culturally relevant curriculum and learning materials in a language with which they are familiar with. Examples, kasi sir, may examples naman ako eh. Yes, examples still use a language. Sir, may instruction materials naman ako. Yes, the instruction materials still use the language. Okay, and if the language that you use for the instructional materials, for your examples, for your visual aids is not familiar, not comprehensible to your students, it still is not helping your students. It is not how good you are in teaching the content. It is how good you are in making your students understand the content in a language that is comprehensible for them. Because at the end of the day, what we want for our students to achieve is to learn the content. And that's via a language that they are familiar with. Sa mother tongue ba yun? I wouldn't know. You should know as a teacher. Baka Tagalog, baka Filipino, baka English. Paano sir kung yung MOTL ay English, pero ang kanilang naintindihan po ay Tagalog? They use Tagalog as the auxiliary language to support the learning of the English MOTL of mathematics. Don't just use the required MOTL. Use other auxiliary English. Nakuha niyo ba ako doon? Ganun ba yun, sir? So, pwede pala kami gumamit ng other language na alam ng bata para masuporta ng pag-intindi. Yes, because what we want is for our students to understand. But our goal is use the language that's comprehensible to them and then eventually and gradually introduce them to be familiar to the language or the MOTL of the subject or the content. Kasi kung to begin with pa lang, hindi na naintindihan ng bata ang MOTL ng subject at pinush mo pa rin at pinagsigi mo pa rin, it would definitely, our students would definitely fail. But if they introduce another language as an auxiliary to the primary MOTL, let's say English ang primary niya, pero ang mga bata ay ang alam nila ay Cebuano, you may use the mother tongue Cebuano as the auxiliary language to help students understand. I've seen a lot of classrooms in Cebu. And they've been doing that to help students understand. Yung palang ibig sabihin nun sa English. Ngayon, naintindihan ko kasi in-explain ni teacher sa amin sa Cebuano. So that's what it means pala in English sa math. See? Ang kailangan lang naman makita ng bata yung connection sa language na alam nila sa language na meron sa content area. Once they see that connection, once they are able to transition to the language of the content, then we are halfway through helping our students succeed in learning the content. That's why it's called teaching and learning. We do not just use the medium or the language as a medium of teaching or a medium of instruction. We want to see it as well as the part of the other side of the coin for students to learn content. I'm not angry. I'm just psyched. Question number 3. We're almost there though. Question number 3. Wait, I clicked on it, but I have not read the question. Okay, question number 3, what are ways to improve teachers' medium of teaching? How do we ensure that the language that we use for teaching and for our instruction definitely help our students understand the content? I will be using CLIL, okay, CLIL, which is, a good design, although there are a lot of other models out there. We have CBLM, CBLI, but I would go for CLIL for now, okay, for this afternoon. But if you want to read more, there are other designs too. There are other models out there. We have CBLI, CBLM. So you may want to research on those too. All right. But for now, again, CLIL. So content and language integrated learning, okay, is the idea that, say, the subject area, okay, and the language, English and Filipino, okay, is we try to aim to learn both the language and the subject knowledge. We cannot separate them. Okay, what we can do here is language teachers also integrate content to the teaching, because language and language alone cannot be the language. Okay? It doesn't have, it's not meaningful. It has to have a shape. It has to have a content. It has to have a context. The context could be the content, the subject area. Now, the subject area should also be trained how to teach the language of the content area. The language teachers need to teach, need to be retooled, and need to be given trainings on how to integrate content area in their subject areas. Integration is the key. Kaya lang po, how can our teachers integrate, say, subject area teachers integrate language if we do not provide them with language trainings? How can we help our language teachers to integrate content areas to their lesson if we do not provide them with content knowledge? Do you think an English teacher would have the audacity to integrate mathematics in their teaching of simple sentences, compound sentences, which a very good way of helping our students understand word problems. Pero hindi gumagano ng mga language teachers natin. Ay nilang takot sila gumamit, mag-integrate ng content to the fear of the fear that because they lack proficiency in the knowledge of the content area, baka masira nila ang content. Kasi hindi pwede mag-integrate lang po tayo. Hindi pwedeng ang mga teachers mag-integrate ng content to the language or the content to integrate language lessons kung hindi binigyan natin ng proper training. So what we want here is that this time, sa mga training po natin sa susunod po, sana, by 2021, the aim of schools is to provide our content area teachers with language trainings so that they can integrate language teaching to the content area and teach students to learn the language of the content, while the language teachers will now be taught how to integrate the content to the language subject. Pwede naman kasi sila mag-collaborate, di ba? So that's what TAIL is all about. It aims for students to learn both the language and the subject knowledge. Paano magagawa ng bata yun kung ang teacher magaling lang sa content pero hindi naman magaling sa language? It has to be both. So language teachers should also have knowledge on the content. Our subject area teachers should also have knowledge of the language. Not anymore that. Okay, so let's proceed to the last question. Yun po ano natin may-train, sinasabi natin, ano natin matutulungan ng mga teachers natin na maturo ang language of the content, supportive language to the MOTL. Turuan natin ang mga content area, bigyan natin ng training ang mga teachers natin. Bakit bumaba ang literacy ng mga bata? Dahil ang tingin natin na ang reading ay pang English na at pang Filipino. Bakit? Hindi ba yan dapat pang math din yan? Hindi ba dapat ang math teacher nagtuturo paano magbasa sa math? Ang mga science teacher, di ba dapat nagtuturo paano magbasa at magsulat sa science? Magkaiba po kasi ang mga nature at landscape ng pagbasa, pagsulat ng language doon sa subject area na yan. The skills may be general, but the language behavior in that content may be too unfamiliar for the students to, apply their literacy skills on. So language, balik po rin tayo ng language. How can students apply their reading or literacy skills on a language they're not familiar with? Halimbawa, marunong kang magbasa at magsulat sa Filipino. Ngayon, pumunta ka ngayon sa Spain. Hindi ka marunong mag-Spanyol. Pinapagsulat ka, sabi niya, do you know how to read and write in Filipino, in your language? Yes. Okay, please write in Spanish. Will you be able, just because you know how to read and write in Filipino, does not necessarily equate to you will be easily be able to transfer your skills to a new language. The first thing you should do is learn the language first. Balik ka rin po tayo. Learn and teach the students the language of the content. So I will just be providing 3 that I have been, again, sorry, I'll be suggesting to you the things that I have done and as a teacher or when I was a teacher. So these are the 3 things that really work well, okay, in my experience. And I'm suggesting this to you, and I hope that you have other strategies in your mind and perhaps share it to others too. So these are the things that I did. 1, I expose my students to authentic materials that uses the language of the content. At siguro mga estudyante ko dati sa Penyo, maalala na din na minsan saka sa Assumption College, nasa labas kami ng classroom, pinapadala ko sila ng magazines and news clippings. So I use those authentic materials that make my students realize that, so this is how the language is used in this, various forms. So expose them. okay, to literature, stories, novels, poems, songs, okay, of course, movies, okay, the movies, magazines, games, online platforms, and then mobile applications. Okay, with that, so kunwari, siguro yun pong challenge ko po ngayon sa mga teachers out there, especially for the online. Gumawa po tayo ng mga games, mga magazines, online platform, mga application na ginagamitan ng mother tongue at ng Filipino. Kasi puro English nga ang ginagamit. Mabuti nga ngayon sa Google po ay pwede po natin i-translate into Filipino but not all, di ba? Pero sana may ganun po tayong application. If you want to truly help our students and our teachers out there, gawan po natin ng application na nagagamit talaga ang language na to in everyday life, sa music, sa literature. Mabuti nga sa mga other places in the Philippines, mayroon po silang news sa kanilang language. Sa Bicol, when I was in Bicol, I think in Leyte ganun din po yata. Ganun po sana. And we ang mga tao naman na nakadon, huwag sabihin, ay ayoko, maghintay ako ng English. Kagaya ng sa misa. Sa misa namin. Okay lang, English lang ang misa ko, pero marunong mag-misa. Ako nga, I'm longing for a misa na in my language, na waray-waray. Kaya lang wala naman dito sa amin. So I have to contend myself with English or Filipino. Comprehensible naman sa akin ng dalawang languages na yan. Okay, so ito po, expose. The books that we have are what we call as graded and contrived. Those are good for instruction. But what we want our students to see is how this language of the content is truly used. So halimbawa, ang mga bata hindi marunong gumamit sa math language kasi hindi naman sila nakakabasa ng mga magazines na may mathematics. O kaya mga reports in science. Diba? So if we expose them on those materials, then we expose our students na how prolific the language of the content is used outside. Like weather. That's a good use of the language for science, diba? Business, the stocks ng newspaper. That's a good use of the language for mathematics. Hindi naman natin ginagawa eh. We rely so much on the language of the teacher that may not be comprehensible for our students. Sir, hindi nga rin comprehensible yung mga nasa news po eh. It's a start. It makes our students see that, so talagang kailangan kong aralin ang language ng content ng math and science and other subject areas kasi nagamit nga talaga siya sa totoong buhay. Pag hindi natin ginawa yun, ang mangyayari ay, I will just survive the subject. After this, I do not care anymore. Second suggestion, I say, facilitate students to learn new vocabulary every day, at least 5 new words a day. Dati kasi ang ginagawa po, nung nakalakang ko pong pag-aaral, lahat ng subject area nag-introduce ng 5 words a day, and kami mga estudyante meron kaming notebook at doon namin sinusulat. Kaya sinusulat namin. I forgot, nayulanda lang talaga yung mga notebooks ko. Nandun ang mga vocabulary na inaaral ko talaga when I was a student until college. Nasanay kasi ako sa elementary at high school na ginaganong kami. Tapos pagdating sa college, ginagawa ko pa rin po yun. So if we help our students at a very young age to pay particular attention to learning new words, vocabulary, every day, then in the language that they are, being exposed to, mother tongue, Filipino, and English, kailan nangyayari po sa atin is hindi natuturo sa mga bata ang yung consciously learning new words every day. It's because the teacher don't even introduce new words every day. They just focus on instruction, but not the language of the instruction. So sad. So what do we teach our students? The special vocabulary, the words that are used in all content areas, but the meaning will change. A good example would be a heart. In science would be a different meaning. And then when it's used to, say, in mathematics, would be a different meaning. When used figuratively in English, ibang meaning niya naman po. These are called special vocabulary. Unyang po, nagbabago-bago ang paglogan niya at naguguluhan ang bata. Like the word root. Pagdating sa math, iba ang meaning ng root. Sa science, iba ang root. Pagdating sa English, iba ang root. Pagdating sa Filipino, ugat, di ba, salitang ugat, ibang sabihin nun. You cannot put literal meaning on it. Another one is technical vocabulary that are endemic to a subject area that students need to contend with. Hindi sila maintindihan na kasi nga ang definition ng word na yan ay sobrang haba. Kagaya ng, halimbawa, isosceles triangle. For the students to understand isosceles triangle, it has to be described to them. So those are technical words. Let I give an example. Photosynthesis is a technical vocabulary. It's we need more explanation to it. We don't assume that when the students read photosynthesis or hear us use the word photosynthesis, they will understand. So kung gagamitin natin yung word na to at first time ng bata may encounter yung photosynthesis, then we have to define those. Next would be dictionary games. This is what I have been doing. Okay, before I begin, I have the dictionary here, nung tuto ako sa assumption which I captured from my mom. Okay, I have a dictionary here. So last week we were in category A. We're now in category B. I'm going to give you so remember you must think of words that begin with letter B. And I'll give you the definition, and then anyone who then you're going to write you're going to write the word on your ang meron kaming yung sa assumption nun ang ginagamit namin ay whiteboard. Okay? Then sa public school naman, ang ginagamit natin yung black na yung illustration board, yung black sa likod tas may chalk. Okay. So those are good a way of helping ourselves. Yung mga bata na hindi nila alam yung word na yon, get to learn those words too. Another one is board games, like the Monopoly. What I liked so much when I was growing up is playing Scrabble with my family. That really helped me a lot. And boost. Ang ginagawa ng mother ko noon is katabi palagi namin ng Unbridged Merriam-Webster's Dictionary. Katabi namin ng okay? So it helps. It has to be a conscious effort to help kids. We do not just, assume that and hope and pray that by our extensive explanation and use of the language, our students will eventually indirectly learn the language too. Suntok sa buwan po yun. Yung direct nga na pagtuturo ng wika ng asignatura o wika ng subject na yun ay nahihirapan pa ang bata. Ano pa kaya hindi niya tinuturo? Mobile applications are good. Ngayon, kids are learning so fast because a lot of mobile applications of learning new vocabulary. Why not use those, especially if you have online teaching? And finally, encourage parents. So enlist ulit natin ang mga magulang. Encourage parents to have conversations with their school-age children to talk about what they are learning using the MOTL. Okay? May mga magulang akong narinig. Nasa bahay na nga sila, mag-i-English pa sila. Nasa bahay na nga sila, magtatagal. Bisaya na po, uy! O, sabi ko, it's okay that you speak Bisaya at home. But then again, ano man lang during dinner, sabi, okay, so what did you learn? Anong napag-aralan niyo sa Filipino? At least nagagamit ng Filipino. Nakikita ng mga bata, sa Filipino yan, huwag ka mag-Bisaya. Explain mo sa akin sa Filipino. Okay, ngayon, sa mathematics, saan tutunan mo sa mathematics? Use English because you're using English. Yung mga ganong sitwasyon sa bahay encourages students to do their utmost to learn the medium of learning of the subject area. Okay, so that's about it. I know that you're hearing a lot of noise. Talagang kahit umuulan dito sa amin ay talagang construction pa rin ng building sa tabi namin. All right, so with that, I'm now ready to answer some of your questions.
Thank you very much, brother. Our first question is from Raquel Reyes. What if the language used by the teacher is not the language of the students? What can you suggest po?
You are not, so we're talking about here the mother tongue sa baba po natin. So what will happen now is that the student will not adjust to you. So dapat humahanap ang school ng appropriate na teacher na mag-handle ng subject na yon. So you are not the right teacher to handle those group of students who has a different familiar language or mother tongue than yours. So again, yun yung problema. Isa walang available, then endure yourself to learn the language. Yun po mangyayari po natin. Ang adult po talaga ang mag-a-adjust. Hindi yung bata mag-a-adjust sa adult. So if situation happens like ang school talaga walang available na taong magtuturo na familiar or similar to the language of the group of students, say mother tongue ng bata, then what we do is we provide training to the teachers to learn and acquire the language of the children. And nangyayari po yan. There are a lot of situations where especially yung mga teachers na nakapag-asawa at napadayo, napunta sa iba, uh, that do truly happens a lot. So it's either humanap ang school ng teacher na has that same familiar language or same mother tongue, or kung wala talagang available, hindi pwedeng ang bata sabihin, oy, ang alam lang ng teacher ninyo kasi ay English, o di mag-English na lang kayo, kalimutan yung mother tongue, struggle ang mga bata niyan. So anong gagawin po natin? Idi turuan ng teacher. Si teacher muna, bigyan muna ng training. Training muna. Ngayon, sir, hindi talaga kaya, o di tingnan natin kung ano ang similarity ng dalawa. Halimbawa, mother tongue. Ang teacher, mother tongue, iba rin. Hindi magkapareho ng mother tongue. Second question. Ang mga bata ba nakaintindi kahit sa listening at kahit sa listening man lang kahit hindi nakapagsalita pero nakaintindi ng Tagalog? Opo, nakaintindi po sila kasi sa radyo, sa TV, and so on and so forth, nakaintindi po sila ng Filipino po. Si teacher ba marunong ng Filipino? O di, yun po ang gamitin natin muna to bridge the gap. So that's how you decide. Hahanapin nyo yung comprehensible sa pareho ng teacher at estudyante. Hindi pwedeng comprehensible lang sa teacher pero hindi comprehensible sa bata. Kawawa ang bata. So, trabaho po natin as educator is to look the commonality of the language of language of familiarity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, brother. Our next question is from Melody. Is this similar po to MTB-MLE?
Excuse me, I didn't get the first time. The first words.
Is this similar to MTB-MLE po?
Well, what the MTB MLE has been telling us, definitely follow the MOTL. Kung ano po ang pinagsasabi ko dito, yun mismo ang nakalagay sa guidelines ng language policy ng MOTL. And that's right. Tama po. Kung nakuha nyo po, I don't want to say it's MTB MLE kasi marami pong mga tao. The principles that I have provided you with are the principles of using the language in general, kahit siyan sa Pilipinas o sa ibang mundo. Ang MTB MLE kasi, yan po ang programa ng Pilipinas sa paggamit ng wika sa pagtuturo. Sa ibang bansa kasi may bilingual, di ba? Tayo lang kasi ang mayroong multilingual. Tayo po kasi ay ibang klase ang multilingual education na ginamit po natin. It's mother tongue based multilingual. Yung iba kasi ay iba ang ginamit na multilingual po sila pero di mother tongue. Ginamit nila po ang second language or national language. Sa atin kasi MTB. So on that note po, sa atin po, it's similar. The principles that I've been talking about are also the same principles in the MTB MLE program in the Philippines because they uphold, the MTB MLE uphold the idea and principles of using language, okay, to support the learning of our students. It's not just the language per se. Wala pong hierarchy ang language. Language serves its purpose as a vehicle for learning and for teaching. For as long as the language that you choose is comprehensible to both students and teachers. Alas, what's happening in the field is that it's just comprehensible for the teacher, especially for some content areas, but it's not comprehensible for students. So the question is, hindi ba talaga naintindihan ng bata ang subject o hindi talaga naintindihan ng bata ang wika ng subject? I'll leave you the answer to that question.
Thank you very much, sir. That's all the questions we have for now. Any last reminders to our viewers for today po?
All right. So before I call it a day and I call it a week, if you see me very passionate. I'm so passionate about education in the Philippines. Passionate about making our students better learners, and language is one of those. And reading and literacy is one of those disciplines that closest to my heart. And I apologize if I was so emotional. But before I end, I ask permission from Vibal to plug in from our school po. Sa school po namin sa Boys Town, we have this, the digital concert AL. AL is the fund, the name that we call our founder, Father Al. So we call it Culture Al. It's our third year. But this year we are going to make it digital. So we call our theme for this year's online concert or virtual concert is bringing the Alotian spirit at the comfort of your homes. Okay, a showcase of Alotian talents. These are all our students. I would like to, I'm opening this up. This is the only time you can see what our students have accomplished at the Sisters of Mary. Okay, here at the Sisters of Mary. So please watch, and you will see that pinagsama-sama kasi namin dito yung academic, ang curricular, co-curricular, at extracurricular prowess ng aming mga estudyante. And you will see these are all student efforts. Sila po ang nagawa nito pati mga video. So I would like you to see how a school can provide and make our students learn a lot. It's Facebook Live though. This is on December 21. And the first streaming would be on 1 o'clock. Second streaming would be 4 p.m. And the final streaming would be on the third part, so 7 p.m. on December 21. So please visit our official Facebook, SMSAI Cultural Concert. So that's a Facebook. So just search SMSAI Cultural Concert, or you can click this. Kaya lang hindi nyo nakikita, wala kayo niyan. So yun lang, hanapin nyo na lang po yan sa Facebook. Okay? Or call our telephone numbers, landline 046-865-2546, 02529-8318, 046-443-167, or telephone numbers, our cell phone numbers, we have 0920-874-6721. Take a picture of it. Take a picture of it so that, please contact, please support our students, and at the same time see how we do our efforts to make our students the best and have the best experience that they have in at the school. Okay, high quality education. All right, so that's about it. So here's my final statements for you guys. What we know, okay, what we know now, okay, this is actually from United Nations and British Council. Children or students learn best when the first language of instruction is their mother tongue. Lots of research shows that. Only that here in the Philippines is that not all first language is intellectualized or common or would have environmental print or print to support the learning of it or the teaching of it. So what we need to do is to support the community in creating materials using the language. Next, results of learning assessments show that when home and school language differ, there is a negative impact on test scores. So, pumapasok po dito ang sinasabi po natin that we capture the language of the child at home or in their community if it's similar, if it's not, language at home, and at the same time enlist the support of the parents so that our parents also use that language at home. So this is my challenge to you people out there. UNESCO says there are more than 7,000 known living languages, and most children grow up in an environment where more than one is spoken. However, studies show that almost 40% of children do not have access to an education in a language they understand, and this is negatively affecting their learning. So the question is, are we really helping students to learn? And if we want to help our students learn, then we have to take care of identifying what language is most comprehensible to them. And by that, once they have learned and acquired those skills, it would facilitate learning of other languages and learning other content areas. I would like to leave you guys with the statement from our Holy Scripture from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 that says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good for building up, as fits the occasion, that may give praise to those who hear." All languages are equal, but the users of the language are the ones who have a different idea of how to use the language. Language is pure, but it becomes impure, it becomes bad, it becomes lower because of the perspectives and belief system or otherwise of people using the language. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon, and I hope to see you next time around, and that will be, of course, next week. If not next week, next year. Thank you very much and happy holidays, advance happy holidays to you, all of you.
There we have it. In behalf of Bell Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this very eye-opening and insightful learning session. It is an honor to have you with us today, brother. And to all our Kavibal viewers, All thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Don't forget to register to get your e-certificate of participation. We also encourage you to subscribe and watch on our official Viva Facebook and YouTube channel. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.